So the topic for this week is, like I said, is livestock handling. So I guess the first thing to think about, right, with hold on, I'm just listening.
It's penis.
Yeah, it's the dogs. Anyway, sorry. It was a little OCD moment or whatever. But anyway, so like
I think it was OCD.
Yeah, ADD,
Something
like that. Livestock handling. So I guess the first sort of things to think about when it comes to livestock handling is we're going to talk about sheep and cattle because that's what we've got experience with. Obviously, there's bison and pigs and llamas and alpacas. And there's some chickens. There's some, although yeah. Anyway, there are some principles that are universal across species. And some things that we'll talk about that are different between handling with sheep and cattle specifically, but as such, there will be differences between sheep and cattle, as there will be differences between bison and llamas and pigs and chickens and rabbits and goats.
One spits in your face, one...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway. Yeah, so let's just talk about some of the universal concepts that we've learned from Greg and also, learn from experience and whatnot. I think probably the number one thing, just to kick it off, is to make sure that whenever you're handling animals, and that means any way, shape, or form, like if you're doing them, paddock moves, if you're working them in the chute, if you're tagging
on a cattle drive,
or castrating, or vaccinations, or like any number of those things, sorting them off to go bring them to the vet or something like that. Anytime that you are, I guess, in the presence of that animal and influencing the way it's moving or going about its day, like that would count as livestock handling. So I think the first thing right off the bat is you should never ever be in a rush.
Always leave your watch in the truck.
That's what Greg told us, because animals can sense when you're like they can sense your attitude and sort of mood as you're going about things. And so if you're just sort of frantically rushing around because you're late for something, or you just like left something on in the stove, and so like, or on the stove or in the oven or something, and you want to get back because you want to eat dinner, or there's a football game or something, right? Those are the times when you're rushing where stuff is just going to blow up in your face. So if you can just take a breath before you go in with whatever animal you're about to deal with, and just be like, oh, this will take as long as it takes, and it can wait. I can always make a new dinner. I can always record the football game. Like that kind of stuff. So don't be in a rush. It'll actually make it go faster.
Yeah, because a lot of times, if you just take it easy and go take your time, it's gonna go faster than if you rush it. Things go bad, and then you're midnight and with a headlamp chasing cattle. Or whatever, and then with pouring rain in the and sort of along the same lines, like if something does go not according to plan when you're sorting something off and it jumps a fence or runs back in or jumps off the farm, or like something goes completely awry when you're dealing with them, along the same lines of don't be in a rush, you also should not try as hard as you can to not get angry or upset when stuff like that happens, because again, the animal can sense when you're pissed off, and it will react poorly to you if you're just angry or seeing red or whatever, and you're like, that stupid cow, like that kind of thing. If you can just take a deep breath and be like, it's fine, it'll be all good, we'll get it back, like no worries, it'll just take a little bit longer. If you can sort of just keep that really mellow attitude when you're in there and dealing with them, even when stuff goes wrong. Yeah. You gotta kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah. Keep it calm, keep it controlled, keep it nice and steady, not in a rush, and stuff, regardless of what you're doing, that's gonna help you out a lot.
And for different people, it's easier for some people than it is for others.
Yeah. So if you're naturally a go kind of person, or you naturally get upset about things like easily, and you sort of know that about yourself, you got to even be more conscious. If you're a super mellow guy or girl, you're gonna do pretty well just because of your nature. So that's probably the biggest number one thing to think about in the beginning.
Yep. Another big one, especially with cattle, is your safety comes first before anything else, and you really have to keep in mind what you're handling, what kind of animals are your animals a little bit sparky. Are they a little bit excited, or are they mellow? Do they get crazy when they get into the corral? Do they are they trying? If you're tagging a calf, is the mother gonna come after you, and or is she just gonna be fine? Like, you just got to be aware of that and understand that they are big, strong animals, and in the flash, in the blink of an eye, they could maim you for life, if
in best case scenario, sometimes.
Best, like, they could kill you, they could. And so you just have to keep that in your mind at the back of your mind at all times,
regardless of how mellow the animal is,
right,
too, because we've had cattle that are totally chill. You can basically go up and pet them almost when they're out in the pasture,
and you get
them up in a chute, and they
go ballistic.
They go ballistic because they just don't have any experience being in there, because they rarely have to go in. And that's something that we could work on, but getting them more used to a handling facility. But at the same time, it's like, it's not everybody. It's just some individuals. No matter how much you're gonna get them accustomed to it, they're always going to be at minimum a bit more jumpy when they get in there. And so something that you would have no problem, walking around and it's out in the pasture just minding its own business, when you get it in the chute, if you're not paying closer attention, you could end up getting absolutely rocked. So just
and always
to keep in mind.
Always have an escape route in the back of your mind, like a way that if something goes wrong, you can get away, get out of there. Whether that looks like if in the corral, maybe that's a little slip gate where you can fit through, but the animal can't, or maybe you can just stay by a gate so you can jump up on the gate and get above them, or
jump up on the corral.
In the pasture, maybe it's like you put the bulls in, and your bull is a little bit feisty, and you don't trust them. Maybe you don't go into a paddock without the 4-wheeler or without trees in it or something that you can get away. So
you got to keep that stuff in mind, because you being safe is the number one should be the number one priority.
And especially if you have children.
It's even more
they are children are what's the right word?
Unaware
and just spontaneous, and they don't think what they do sometimes about what
a lot of the time.
And so things that they might think is just fine, a cow is not going to think like a child, and
and small children also, they don't freak cattle out, but the cattle can, and the cattle definitely, even Greg's cattle, which are about as mellow as it gets, when there's a little kid around, you can tell that their attention is on that little human being. They because they're not accustomed to seeing something that small.
Anything that small is a predator to them, because coyotes or stray dogs or whatever.
So they're just a little bit more edgy when they see little kids.
And part of that too is they're not used to little kids. If
little kid was moving them every day,
right? If you're out there with your kids, your cattle are going to get more accustomed, and I'm sure many of you know that. They're gonna be fine with your kids walking around, but I still I don't know.
It's just so
it's so easy for them to just flip, and then I don't even want to think about
as an older person, a functional, aware, adult or young adult or whatever. If you're able to sort of be aware of your surroundings and be able to react, that's the big thing. And that kids are just not they're not aware of the fact that there's two cows tussling in the background. We should just step back and make sure that we don't get in that way, and in case they come barreling over here as they're fighting each other, and they're not trying to hurt you, but they could just mow you down. And so with us, we were around them so much that you see it happening, and it's almost subconsciously you're aware, and so you don't get in that way. When they start coming close, you just sort of step to the side or step off, and you're totally fine. But with a kid, they don't have that kind of awareness, and so stuff can go really bad really fast. But anyway,
so we, on the same topic of your safety, you got to kind of know the danger zones of an animal. Like cattle, they can kick.
Yep.
And we've been kicked a couple times.
Yeah.
I've been kicked by a calf.
I got kicked the other day.
Yeah, you did the other day. And with kicks, it's there's a place where they can't reach you, and then you're safe. And once you get in that range, then you're in danger. But then if you get really close enough to where if they kick, it's just gonna it's just gonna feel like a nudge or whatever because they can't get the.
They sort of hit you with their butt or their quad or whatever. Like they can't really get their hoof turned around and like.
Yeah, and so then you're kind of, there's a range there where if you get hit in that range,
it's like a jackhammer. Yeah, it happens so fast.
Greg got kicked really bad one time when they were working heifers. And he got kicked right in the thigh, and he said it brought him down, like, felt like he got shot.
Yeah, he thought he had broke his leg.
Just brought him straight to the ground.
But he didn't. I mean, it was just a bad bruise.
It's quick, too. Like, I've been kicked at, but I've been, far enough away that I've been fine so far.
Yeah. I was just forking hay yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, we do it, like, at this point, we're doing it twice a day. We're forking out, and we've been doing that for months. So they're super used to it. And you get to know when you're forking hay, like what animals you could literally like grab a hold of and push out of the way. They're that docile. And then other animals that like you don't really want to be like hanging out in that danger zone if you're like, forking hay and stuff sort of flying around. Like they just might get a little uneasy and just throw out a warning kick. But even like a little warning like half kick or whatever, that'll still hurt. And that's what happened to me. It was just like there was a cow that was just turned around walking away. I didn't even see her, and I just turned, and I must have moved my pitchfork too fast, and she saw it out of the corner of her eye, and she just let out like a warning kick, but I was right perfectly in range, and she just hit me on like the thigh, but it didn't hurt at all, because she wasn't trying to kick me. It was just like whatever that is, like just get away or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the big cow, the older cows, like anything over like 2 years, are just too lazy to kick, or they're not
to put any force behind it.
They're not gonna put a lot of effort in a kick. Calves, on the other hand, especially once you get them up into the corral, it's
full
like
bore.
Lightning kicks, like pow, pow, pow. It's like so fast.
And bulls too, when you're trying to sort bulls like at the vet.
And like if you're shutting a gate behind them and it's touching against their like hocks or whatever, a lot of times they'll get pissed about that and just nail the gate, and then you gotta
keep that gate out there so it doesn't
take your
smack
teeth
you
out
in the face.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I guess that's probably a good recap of personal safety, which is those are sort of the big things right off the bat. Never be in a rush. Make sure that you stay calm and collected at all times.
Have an escape
route, and always be thinking of your personal safety.
And the danger zones, like on the animal.
On the animal. And with like sheep, with rams, for example, like getting run into, any sort of space with a sheep, like a full grown sheep, is when they can get speed up, and that's when they can do some sort of damage. Yeah. You got pounded from behind with a. That doesn't sound good. You got pounded by a sheep.
I wasn't looking. I got
absolutely run over. Yeah. I mean, like you didn't
fall over.
Slammed into. I just turned around and there was a sheep airborne, like 4 feet flying at you from like behind. It landed right on your upper back.
It slammed me right there in the nice. Cushion spot. But it was just a U. I was looking at her, and she was looking at me. She was like, 6 feet away, looking me right in the eyes, and I turned around, and then, boom, right into my back.
But with sheep, it's less of a big deal because they're smaller animals. So, that's the danger zone with sheep, is you just have to think, if I can get them in a tight space where they can't build up a lot of speed when they're in the corral, you're way safer than if you're in sort of a medium-sized space, and they've got 20 feet to get a run. Like they pick up speed. It's like instantaneous acceleration. They'll go from being standing still to like full sprint in like 2 steps. Mm-hmm. So that's something.
And also with the rams or ewes too. If you can get to a ram or a ewe, pick up one of its front legs and press it up against their body. Once you do that, it immobilizes them, and they have no leverage.
They sort of hobble around a little bit.
Like they can't push forward because you've got them, you got them like held, and they can't push up because they've got one leg, and it just stops their movement. And so if you can keep that leg up to them, you pretty much
just guide. And you don't have to lift them when you do that either. Yeah. You can just sort of guide them like wherever you want them to go on their own power.
Yeah.
Sheep. The way that we can get into that in a second. But I guess now if we want to sort of like move into like more like I don't know, more like sort of, if we want to focus on cattle first, as far as like techniques for just basic. I mean, for people who aren't aware of who Bud Williams is, he's sort of the I would say greatest of all time as far as livestock handling. Any sort of livestock, but cattle in particular is what he is famous for. And so there's still a school that's taught
his daughter, he passed away, or no, it's his wife.
I think it's his wife.
His wife. What's her name? It's with an I.
It's not Eunice.
It's Eunice.
Yeah.
It's Bud and Eunice Williams, and then his daughter is also.
I think the whole family's still involved with putting on these livestock handling schools. But anyway, that's sort of like where Greg has learned all of his.
This is the guy. He went into Canada and he was able to, using his techniques. He herded a caribou.
Yeah.
Into a. I think he even. Was it on? No, it wasn't onto a ship. That was the other cattle.
That was like these wild cattle for generations in the Aleutian Islands that they couldn't get off the island because they're just completely wild.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to go on there and working with them for a long period of time was able to walk them onto a barge.
Yeah. Just from herding them.
From like herding
on
techniques.
his feet with dogs, maybe.
So we're not anywhere near approaching like that kind of a level. But it's more just some of his general principles of like how to handle livestock is. I mean, like he would say, because this is all third person because we're learning it from Greg who learned it from him.
Mm-hmm.
But, never be in a rush, like that kind of stuff, always be moving nice and calm and collected and slowly. Like that's all sort of Bud Williams-esque, like low stress livestock handling principles. But basically all it is like you're trying to think about, okay, like what is the cow thinking,
She's so let's just say this first. A cow is a prey animal, and so she feels most comfortable when she's got something behind her because she knows she doesn't want to fight, but she knows she can outrun whatever it is. And so she has a way to get away. She feels safe.
Super
so if she's got an eye on you behind, she feels real comfortable walking. That's why, like the whole, and Bud used to say this to Greg, like the whole cow call thing. Like where Greg can call his cattle and they'll hear that and they'll come. It works because we've trained the cattle to it, but there's some times, and it's happened with us here.
It would be so useful.
Where it's unnatural for cows to come because that means like we're predators to them, and so for us to call them and them to come, that's unnatural. So he would say like you always should be driving them,
like teaching your cattle
how to drive.
Which
drive as in like walk. In the way you
not get behind the wheel of a car.
Walk the way you tell them to. The way with your body language you tell them to walk.
And that's the big thing. It's like you're basically getting inside the head of the animal and thinking what it would be thinking, right? Mm-hmm. I feel most comfortable since I'm a big, fast, strong animal. I feel most comfortable with stuff behind me, right?
Get a paper so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I feel most comfortable with things behind me. So. Therefore, if you apply pressure, meaning if you get closer to that animal within what would be called its flight zone, and with Greg's cattle, it's basically like we can touch them. So that's about the flight zone is maybe a foot or two for 90% of the animals that are in that herd. For a lot of other cattle, it might be 6 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 yards. It just depends on how comfortable your cattle are with you on foot. And so you apply pressure by like approaching that flight zone. And if you can think about, okay, where do I want that animal to go? I want them to go through that gate, or I want them to go into that pasture, or something like that. You just stand in a way where the most logical option for the animal is to move in the direction you want it to move, if that makes any sense. So if I want it to move to the right, I would move my body over to the left so that I'm applying pressure on the left side of the animal, meaning that it feels more comfortable going to the right as opposed to going to the left, and vice versa. If I want it to go to the left, I make sure I put more pressure on the right-hand side of the animal so that it starts to turn and go towards the left. And that way you sort of, if you wanted to go straight, you sort of just like move in a zigzag motion behind the animal, trying to get it like pressure on one side, it goes a little bit one way, pressure on the other side, it goes a little bit the other way, and they sort of start to get the picture, okay, I feel comfortable heading this direction because he's not getting closer to me if I keep walking that way. And so that's sort of like the basics of being able to move an animal just with like the positioning of your body. And Bud used to work with dogs. We don't work with dogs, but that's an augmentation to this whole process is if you have a dog that's working with you, the dog knows even better instinctually than you do where it needs to be positioned to get the animal to move where it wants it to move. And so either working with another person, you got to be really in tune with the other person as far as who's standing on what side and how far up in relation to that animal you are if you want it to walk in a certain direction. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the basics is You just apply pressure to get them to go in a certain direction. And as soon as they start walking and they do what you want them to do, you release that pressure. So they feel like, oh, this feels good. I'm getting away from that sort of weird closeness that I was to that person back there. And so that way they start walking and you almost take a half step back and let them do their thing and you slowly follow them. And when they stop, you stop. And then you just apply a little bit of pressure either by taking a little step forward, or sometimes it's just shifting your weight from side to side or walking back and forth, a couple steps back and forth. They start to feel that pressure from you and they'll start moving away in the direction that you want them to go. And
you
so
talk about the T?
No, I was sort of trying to explain it, but it'll be easier to draw.
So
Don't mind the ginger in the top corner. That was going to be our grocery one on our grocery list for next week.
So let's see. This is going to be hard because I can't see it.
It's fine.
And
so the cow is the cow is the 8.
So this is the cow right here, and she's looking out her eye. Her vision is like angle. I'm gonna draw that.
Yeah. So you don't want to be positioned directly behind the animal because she can't see you. You got to be off to an angle so she can see you out of the corner of the eye.
Her blind spot is this area right here where she can't see. And if you're in that area, she feels uncomfortable and she then turns her head to be able to see you, and that stops movement. So you want to keep your body out here so she can see you, and she can see you're following her. So she's going to keep walking, and she feels comfortable because you haven't gone into her blind spot. And so there's a T directly, straight from where you want her to go, and then perpendicular. You could be standing on either of these spots to get her to go down this, to follow this T, which the T may be where you want her to go into the corral or whatever. If you want her to go that way, then you make the T like this. So like this guy would come up here, and this guy would fall back. If you're doing it by yourself, then you'd come over here, to get her to go more at an angle. That's kind of the basics. That gives you a picture
of how we would
where you'd be positioned and
exactly.
how you control her.
And if you're moving a group of animals, you should always focus on the animals in front, like the lead animals, because if you can get those animals to start moving, like just a small portion of them to move the direction you want them to move, the rest of the animals are just going to follow the ones that are going. So if you just ignore the ones that are in the back, and even if they're sort of like turning around or looking, but if you can keep the ones in the front going the direction you want them to go, the rest of the animals will start moving like a siphon.
Because if you try to get in the behind them and get all of them all at once, then the cows in the front are going to be like, what the heck is he doing? Turn around and look at you. Oh, and then stop movement.
Yeah. So just focus on the ones in the front. And there's a lot of stuff, like more detail than we could really even explain without notes in front of us as far as things to be doing. Bottom line is, though, another great alternative if you're trying to handle cattle, and we use this sometimes when they're just super stubborn about wanting to go in a certain direction and we can't get them to turn. And this comes back to the fact that our cattle aren't accustomed to driving. They're so they're not taught to drive, which is a bit of a problem in certain circumstances. So what we'll do, because they're so broke to polybraid, is we'll get a V of polybraid around them where we'll have one guy holding it up here, one guy holding it up here, and one guy in the back. And you can catch them all, or a chunk of them in a V, and start walking them in the direction you want them to go. And they respect that wire, so they won't try to come back. And you just keep moving that portion of them where you want them to go, and the rest of them will see their buddies walking away and be like, oh man, maybe we should go over there. And once you get a critical mass of them moving, the whole herd will start moving in that direction. So if you're inexperienced with this I would recommend trying it and getting used to it. But if you're super inexperienced with this and you got to get your animals in a certain place, if they're broke to hot wire, making a V with that, either with 3 people or 2 people in a fence, that's technique that we use a lot because our animals aren't taught to drive. Yeah, with
Greg's animals, since they're so docile, it's like you got to be on their hip.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of them, it's basically within arm's reach.
Yeah.
That's their.
Like, oh, okay, I guess I should get going now.
Yeah. The annoying part is like our friend 864. Like we call her our friend. We call her our friend because we can go up and like start scratching her behind her ears. She has no fight zone. So if you ever want her to move, like off of a piece of hay you're trying to fork out or something, you like have to physically try to push her out of the way, because if you just stand there, she'll be like, oh. If you try to like touch her, she'll be like, oh yeah, feels kind of good. Thanks.
I like the scratch.
You have to like shove her out of the way to get her to start moving,
or pat her or whatever,
or like
do some way to get her out of there.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's sort of like cattle basics. With sheep. Sheep are a little more interesting. Actually, let's talk about this before I shift to sheep.
Bud box. So, Bud Williams designed this cattle handling
apparatus
facility, kind of that best suits the bovine's brain. And so, when they're in the corral, they're always looking how to get out, looking for escape points. And so, if you can capitalize on that desire to get out, the animals are going to feel more comfortable because they think they're getting away, and then they're just going to work so much better. So this is how I'm going to wait and make sure I can see it, because the other one was kind of hard to see. Waiting for my phone to
catch up. If you just try to not wiggle the table, it'll also help too.
Okay.
One of these days I'll get a tripod.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah,
it works pretty good. All right, so this is the bud box that I'm talking about, this square. Let's say this is a gate. The cattle are in here, and you open the gate and you sort off one or two head, and they go running in here. This is the dotted line that they're going. And so then you take the gate and you shut it, and you walk in behind them, and you follow the exact way that they went, and they're going to keep circling around this pen. They're going to come up against this gate, and they're going to see the opening right here. And they think they're going to get away. And so then, like, oh, I'm going to go back to the way I came. And so they go running straight down into the chute, and you've got them caught. And so it's like this constant flow. And then, you open it up, you get one in there, you shut it, you follow them, and they run right in through the chute. And cattle respect straight, or they're more recognize comfortable with straight lines. Like straight. They're not like a curve. They feel kind of wary because they don't think on a curve. They don't run on a curve. They run straight to get away. And so,
like, what's behind that curve? Like, they're not really entirely sure. And that's the reason.
Also, like, flat stops, or like flat, like a gate that'll stop them. Yeah. They respect that because it's a barrier. I can't go around. It's not gonna do anything. So like, the more straight ways you can get your cattle to go in your corral, the better they're gonna work for you.
And though, like, there's specific dimensions for that bud box.
It's like 20 by 10.
If you look it up online, like, it's super accessible. So just look up the dimensions, because there's dimensions for that square and dimensions for like the run or whatever, and that kind of a deal. But that's the concept, and we need to install one in one of our facilities because there's one facility that we use.
We have a curve, and
it's brutal. I mean, that's where most of the kicks happen, is trying to get calves through that, trying to get calves around that curve. And they don't like going around the curve because they can't see what's on the other side. But as soon as you can get them, like, their head around that curve and they can see an opening through the chute,
they're going.
Then they go. But it's that process of forcing them to go around that curve. And some of them it's fine, but most of them it's a struggle. And some of them it's almost impossible. So
and there's I just want to get that.
Yeah. But yeah, bud box, look into it if you're thinking about setting up corrals, because it will make your life a million times easier. Even with like a couple head, one or two head, it'll, like, I mean, if you're setting up a corral and you have a small herd, it's not something that you need huge numbers for it to make sense, Like, even small numbers, like, it'll just, everything just works so much easier if you've got a system like that. We saw it in action at Ben's place. When we sorted those, he's got one. We sorted those bulls.
Yeah, that's right, and it worked
good. Super well. Yeah, we loaded those bulls. I mean,
there was a guy that came to the grazing school, and he had built one, and he's like, I would never go back to the other way. Like, he's like, we can work our 300 cows in like 6 hours or something. Like, whereas before it took like the whole day into the night. So
it's a huge advantage.
We would recommend it.
Yeah. We need to build one, and Greg wants to build one. It just hasn't happened yet.
It's one of the things that, there's always a list.
Yep.
And you just gotta keep.
That's a big project, though. That's not something we can just bang out. We need to get somebody to come in and restructure that corral. But anyway, so that's, I guess, like a good covering of. I'll just touch on sheep super briefly, and we'll jump into questions. That's with cattle. With sheep, you just have to keep in mind that they have a really strong herd instinct. So which comes in handy when they're operating as a group, because if you can get them as a group, they will bunch up and go wherever the group's going. Like cattle sometimes like to think on their own, and they'll do something weird when you're not expecting it, which can be annoying. But the easy thing about cattle for the most part is that they individually they herd really well, or at least Greg's cattle
you could herd really well. one cow
just by applying pressure, using a polywire V or something like that. Sheep, they're even better as a group, but individually they're nightmares to deal with. Like they are
when they get out, they freak.
When they get out, they freak. Like they'll run at you before, like they just break all rules of, of like herding and pressure and whatever. It just doesn't apply. They're just constantly like, I gotta get back in.
If you were quick enough, you could do it. Like they will respect it, but then they just run past you because you're too slow.
That's where dogs come in handy. Herding dogs, because dog is fast enough to keep up with the sheep. You are not fast enough to keep up with the sheep.
We tried. Remember that ram?
Oh, yeah.
We were sprinting around in our coveralls in the snow trying to catch
a ram.
Oh,
it was brutal.
Nightmare. He's still out.
The only other chance that you've got is if you have a four-wheeler and you have some flat ground that you can operate on. If you can get them, if you can pressure them heavily with a four-wheeler, they'll sometimes just jump through a fence, and that's the way we've gotten some of them back in. But it's not great because you're putting a lot of stress on the
you or the ram. Run over it or something.
Yeah, it's tricky. Dogs would come in handy if you had a trained herding dog or sheepdog. With sheep, it's almost worth doing. Yeah.
Personally, the relationship of a working dog on a farm is like so cool to me.
I know. It's something
like the guard dogs have their purpose and they do they have their own job, and that's super cool.
And you would not want them to be a herding dog.
Right.
It's the exact opposite of what you would want.
They'd just be chasing the sheep around all day. But like it'd be so cool to to have like an old, like especially if you're working by yourself or whatever, like having a dog that understands what's going on and can operate and help and assist on the farm would be super cool.
Yeah, and we already talked about the danger with sheep is space. If they can get a run at you, that's when they can cause some sort of damage. We have a terrible handling facility for sheep because we don't do it that often. So
we don't really have a handling.
So we're using a cattle handling facility for sheep. It's sort of jury rigged, and the way we sort is literally lifting lambs or full grown ewes or whatever and humping them over a fence or through a door or something like that to get them into different compartments. There are some really slick sheep setups, sheep corrals with little split gates and stuff like that just get them to run where you want them to run. So
we went to one of the guys that raises all of Greg's genetics as far as the sheep, and so we buy from him.
Like a portion of the sheep. There's obviously sheep that come from our herd, but a good chunk of them also come from Glenn's herd
up in
North
Missouri, and he had a old hoop barn, and it was probably 100 feet long, maybe a little more.
It probably was more than
and
that.
Probably 50 feet wide.
Yeah.
And he had all these lanes and stuff in there, and then he had this chute system where you had the little door, and then you'd slide it back and forth. Like if you want this one to go, you could slide it shut. The lamb would get weighed, and then you'd slide it this way if it was too heavy, or
if it was a ewe or a ram or whatever.
Just you can just this way, and it would. The way it would work is when you had it in the middle, it'd be closed, and then as you went this way, it
opened.
It opened like that, and then as you went like this, it opened like that.
It's hard to describe.
As you slid it, it would angle.
So you could the same door would shoot you to two different directions.
Yeah. And so and then he also had this.
He designed it himself.
Homemade ram rotating lifter thing.
So like
they'd go into the chute. Yeah.
Yeah. The little ram would run into the chute, and then this little thing would basically hold onto the ram, and it would flip him up on his belly with his feet in the air. And
so his testicles were
right at
working
table height level. Yeah.
And then
you just band him, rotate him back down, and then off he goes.
Open the chute and he's gone.
The way we do it is we lift them up, flip them upside down, hold their legs up like this, so you have somebody else doing
on the video. Remember when I got kicked on the video?
Yeah. That's a nugget for all you out there.
If you guys go back to our sheep
castration
last summer,
there's footage of you just getting clocked by a little ram.
It really, I expected it and I jumped back in time, but it looks like I just got absolutely reamed.
But anyway,
it's funny.
Sheep are less dangerous, but it can be super physical work in a corral if you're having to move them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do production sheep, invest in a purpose-built sheep handling facility.
We're doing production, but it's second priority, and it's only 150 ewes.
And it's
so
only
it's
once
like,
or twice a year.
It's like
yeah.
There's not the number. Like if you were running 1,000 sheep, there's
have to.
no way you'd want to do it.
You need a team. You need a team of people
Yeah.
every time that you would want to work them. Yeah.
There's a guy, the Hopping brothers in Oklahoma.
They're out of sheep right now. They don't raise.
Yeah, they're not raising any sheep.
Yeah.
But they had what they would do is they had this big lane. Greg was telling us about it, and all they had was a cattle panel. And the one guy would stand
in the middle.
There's two. I think it was two brothers. One would stand in the middle where the sheep were, holding them back
with a black trash bag tied to the end of the stick.
And then the other guy had the cattle panel, and then the cattle panel would swing left and right would send them into this pen, and left would send them into this pen. And so what happened is the first brother with the black trash bag would stand up the alley, and then he'd let a couple of them slide by. Like if there were rams, he'd call out ram, 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 and so he'd keep the gate open. Then he'd say, "All right, you." It's then the other brother would shut this, open this gate so that then the ewe would come through, and then he'd just, they just keep doing that, and it was that simple: a cattle panel and a black trash bag on a stick. And so if there was a group of rams and then the ewe was coming, he could stop that ewe just with that trash bag, just from his body placement.
Yep.
And they would run past him because they'd see their buddies in that pen, either the ram pen or the ewe pen. So when they see sheep, they go. They don't stop. They just, I need to get there to the flock. And so it can be as simple as that.
Yep. But just thinking about the way the animal thinks, if you can rely on that, it's going to make things so much easier because they want to do what you were wanting them to do. If that makes any sense.
Yep.
That's universal. I think that's good. That was a long discussion. I didn't know it was going to be that long. Yeah. So let's jump into questions, and I bet there's
I don't think we're going to catch up with them. That's okay.